Why this innocent British briefcase? Bomb shocked even Churchill's inner circle. London, England. November 17, 1941. A leather briefcase sits on a mahogany table inside a windowless conference room beneath Whitehall. Major Millis Jeffress of the Military Intelligence Research Department stands before a gathering of senior War Cabinet officials, including Minister of Supply Lord Beaverbrook and Chief of Combined Operations Admiral Roger Keyes. The briefcase appears entirely unremarkable. Brown leather, brass clasps, scuffed edges consistent with daily office use. Jeffress opens it slowly, revealing stacks of documents and a fountain pen clipped to the interior pocket. Then he lifts the false bottom. Beneath it lies 2 pounds of plastic explosive, a pressure-sensitive detonator, and a mechanical timer no larger than a pocket watch. The room falls silent. Churchill himself, informed of the demonstration afterward, reportedly remarked that the device was disturbingly brilliant and profoundly unsettling. This was not hyperbole. The briefcase bomb represented a paradigm shift in covert warfare, a weapon designed not for soldiers on battlefields, but for civilians in occupied cities, resistance operatives behind enemy lines, and intelligence agents operating in the shadows of the Third Reich. By late 1941, Britain's strategic position had stabilized but remained precarious. Operation Barbarossa had drawn German forces eastward, yet Nazi control over Western Europe was absolute. France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway remained under occupation. Resistance movements across the continent were fragmented, under-equipped, and vulnerable to Gestapo infiltration. The Special Operations Executive, established in July 1940 under Minister of Economic Warfare Hugh Dalton, had been tasked with coordinating sabotage, subversion, and intelligence gathering across occupied territories. Churchill's directive was unambiguous: set Europe ablaze. Yet the tools available to SOE operatives in 1941 were crude, conspicuous, or unreliable. Standard explosives required bulky containers, visible wiring, and technical expertise. Time delay fuses were often unreliable, particularly in damp or freezing conditions. Operatives risked exposure during preparation, transport, and deployment. The briefcase bomb solved all of these problems. It was portable, concealable, and required no specialized training to deploy. More importantly, it was psychologically devastating. A briefcase was ubiquitous in wartime Europe, carried by bureaucrats, engineers, salesmen, and clerks. No one questioned a man carrying one through a checkpoint, onto a train, or into a government building. The weapon exploited the mundane, turning the ordinary into the lethal. The briefcase bomb was not a single device, but a modular concept developed by Station 9, the SOE's experimental weapons laboratory located at the Frith, a requisitioned estate in Hertfordshire. Station 9 operated under conditions of extreme secrecy. Its engineers, many recruited from civilian industries, worked without official military rank or recognition. Jeffress, a career officer with a background in explosives and munitions, led the facility's research teams. The briefcase bomb emerged from a broader program to develop innocent carriers, objects designed to house explosives while resembling everyday items. By mid-1941, Station 9 had produced explosive coal lumps for sabotaging locomotives, incendiary logs for fuel depots, and booby-trapped tins of food. The briefcase represented the apex of this philosophy. Its construction was deceptively simple. A standard commercial briefcase was modified with a reinforced interior compartment, typically located beneath a false bottom or integrated into the rigid frame. The compartment housed plastic explosive, either Nobel 808 or the newer composition C, shaped to maximize blast force while minimizing weight. Detonators varied depending on the mission. Pressure-sensitive mechanisms activated when the briefcase was opened or lifted. Magnetic switches triggered when metal objects were removed or added. Time delay fuses, concealed within the lining, allowed the operative to place the device and withdraw before detonation. The most sophisticated models included anti-handling devices, secondary triggers designed to detonate if the briefcase was tampered with, ensuring that even if discovered, the bomb would fulfill its purpose. Production of briefcase bombs began in early 1942, following Churchill's approval of expanded SOE operations in occupied Europe. Manufacturing was decentralized to prevent detection by German intelligence. Briefcases were procured from commercial suppliers across Britain, each batch chosen to match the styles prevalent in specific target regions. French-style leather cases with double clasps were sent to operatives in Paris and Lyon. German-manufactured cases, acquired through neutral intermediaries in Switzerland and Sweden, were reserved for missions inside the Reich itself. Explosive components were fabricated at Royal Ordnance facilities, then transported under armed guard to Station 9 for final assembly. By June 1942, over 300 briefcase bombs had been distributed to SOE networks across France, Belgium, Norway, and Czechoslovakia. Operatives received training at SOE finishing schools, including Beaulieu in Hampshire and Arisaig in Scotland. Training emphasized simplicity. Operatives were taught to walk naturally, avoid nervous gestures, and maintain plausible cover stories if questioned. The briefcase was never to be set down in public. It was to be carried as though it contained irreplaceable documents, close to the body, gripped firmly, treated with the unconscious care of a bureaucrat protecting sensitive files. The first confirmed use of a briefcase bomb occurred on February 10, 1942, in occupied Oslo, Norway. A Norwegian resistance operative, whose identity remains classified, carried a modified briefcase into the offices of the Reichskommissariat Norwegen, the administrative headquarters of Nazi rule in Norway. The operative, posing as a clerk delivering requisition forms, placed the briefcase beneath a desk in the records department and departed without incident. The bomb detonated 40 minutes later, destroying 3 floors of administrative files related to Norwegian conscription and resource extraction. 12 German personnel were killed, including 2 senior administrators. The explosion was attributed initially to a gas leak, a misidentification that allowed the resistance cell to remain operational for another 11 months. In France, briefcase bombs were deployed with devastating effectiveness against railway logistics. On March 22, 1942, an operative of the Prosper Network placed a briefcase bomb inside the central dispatching office of the Gare de Lyon in Paris. The device detonated during the morning shift change, killing 7 German railway officials and destroying scheduling records for Wehrmacht supply trains moving toward the Eastern Front. The disruption caused delays of up to 72 hours, compounding logistical bottlenecks already straining German supply lines in the Soviet Union. Similar operations followed in Lille, Toulouse, and Marseille. The psychological impact on German occupiers was profound. Security protocols were revised across occupied territories. Briefcases became objects of suspicion. Random inspections increased at checkpoints, railway stations, and government buildings. The administrative burden of heightened security slowed bureaucratic operations and diverted resources from frontline logistics. The briefcase bomb's success, however, also attracted Churchill's personal concern. In a private memorandum dated August 1942, Churchill expressed unease about the weapon's potential for misuse. His primary fear was not German retaliation. Reprisals were expected and already occurring, but the possibility that the technology would proliferate beyond SOE control. Churchill worried that resistance groups, once armed with such devices, might deploy them indiscriminately, targeting civilian infrastructure or political rivals in post-liberation power struggles. His concerns were not unfounded. Intelligence reports from France indicated that certain resistance factions had acquired briefcase bombs through black market channels and were considering their use against collaborationist French officials rather than German occupiers. Churchill's directive, communicated through SOE headquarters at 64 Baker Street, was explicit. Briefcase bombs were to be deployed exclusively against military or strategic targets. Their use against civilian populations, even in occupied territories, was forbidden. Violations would result in the immediate cessation of arms drops to offending resistance networks. This directive created tension within SOE. Field operatives argued that such restrictions were impractical in the fluid, morally ambiguous environment of occupied Europe. The line between legitimate military targets and civilian infrastructure was often indistinct. Was a factory producing uniforms for the Wehrmacht a valid target? What about a restaurant frequented by German officers? These questions were debated in London, but had to be answered in real time by operatives operating under threat of execution. By 1943, briefcase bombs had become a standard component of SOE sabotage operations across Europe. Approximately 800 units were manufactured between 1942 and 1944, with an estimated success rate of 67%, meaning two-thirds of deployed devices detonated as intended. The remainder either malfunctioned, were discovered before detonation, or were abandoned by operatives who judged the risk of deployment too high. German countermeasures evolved in parallel. Security services began using portable X-ray equipment to screen luggage at high-security facilities. Briefcase inspections became routine in government buildings, with guards trained to identify suspicious weight distributions, unusual hinges, or anomalies in interior linings. In response, Station 9 developed second-generation designs incorporating lead shielding to obscure X-ray imaging and vibration-sensitive triggers to deter tampering. The technological arms race between SOE engineers and German security services continued until the final months of the war. One of the most audacious uses of a briefcase bomb occurred on October 15, 1943, in occupied Denmark. An operative of the Holger Danske resistance group carried a modified briefcase into the Copenhagen offices of the Schalburg Corps, a Danish SS auxiliary unit responsible for anti-resistance operations. The operative, posing as a recruitment officer, placed the briefcase in a storage room adjacent to the unit's armory. The explosion, timed to coincide with a shift change, killed 19 Schalburg personnel and destroyed the armory's ammunition stockpiles. The operation was hailed by SOE as a model of precision sabotage. Danish resistance networks received increased arms shipments in subsequent months, solidifying their role in the intelligence networks that would support the Allied invasion of Normandy. As the war entered its final phase, briefcase bombs were adapted for use in post-occupation scenarios. In liberated France, SOE operatives trained French security forces to use the devices against suspected collaborators and black market arms dealers. In Germany itself, as Allied forces advanced into the Rhineland in early 1945, briefcase bombs were deployed against Nazi Party offices and Gestapo safe houses in cities like Cologne and Frankfurt. These operations, conducted by German anti-fascist operatives working alongside Allied intelligence, aimed to accelerate the collapse of Nazi administrative structures and prevent scorched earth destruction ordered by Hitler in his Nero Decree of March 1945. The effectiveness of these late war operations remains difficult to quantify. Chaos and administrative collapse were already widespread, and the incremental contribution of briefcase bomb sabotage is obscured by the totality of Germany's defeat. Nevertheless, post-war intelligence assessments credited the devices with hastening the surrender of certain regional Nazi functionaries who, faced with internal sabotage and external military pressure, chose capitulation over resistance. The legacy of the briefcase bomb extended far beyond 1945. Captured examples were studied by Soviet, American, and French intelligence services, influencing the development of post-war covert operations doctrines. The concept of innocent carrier explosives became foundational to Cold War espionage, appearing in CIA technical manuals and KGB training curricula throughout the 1950s and 1960s. The IRA, ETA, and various Middle Eastern militant organizations later adopted similar designs, often with devastating effect against civilian targets. A grim validation of Churchill's early concerns about proliferation. In Britain, surviving examples of SOE briefcase bombs are held in restricted collections at the Imperial War Museum and the National Archives. Declassification of Station 9 records in the 1990s revealed the extent of the program, sparking renewed academic interest in the ethical dimensions of covert warfare. Historians have debated whether the briefcase bomb represented an innovation in asymmetric warfare or a dangerous erosion of the boundaries separating combatants from civilians. No definitive consensus has emerged. What remains undeniable is the weapon's effectiveness. In an era when conventional military superiority belonged overwhelmingly to the Axis powers, the briefcase bomb offered resistance movements a means of striking back with precision, audacity, and devastating psychological impact. It transformed ordinary objects into instruments of war, exploited the routines of occupation, and reminded those who wielded totalitarian power that even the mundane could betray them.